Welcome, everyone, to the Fantasy Phoenix podcast, here to give you tips for NBL SuperCoach. Let's jump in and review a high-scoring round 9. We fell agonisingly short of cracking the 500 mark for the first time this year with a score of 494. It may not have been as high as it could have, with selecting the lowest scorer of our 4 captain options and Banner missing that second game, but it was good enough for us to climb 68 spots to 170th overall. It was also good enough for us to move to the top of the Podmasters Open League Cup, matching our position in the head-to-head league as well. Can we hold on to both, or at least one of them? Only time will tell. In breaking news, as of this morning, the Adelaide 36ers have mutually agreed to part ways with CJ Bruton. How this will affect them in a SuperCoach sense is yet to be seen, but their schedule isn't great, so we have a while to see how things pan out before we need to jump on any players. In other news, Craig Moller unfortunately went down with a season-ending knee injury over the weekend. You got a feel for him after he missed those couple of years with a different knee injury, but this is going to have some serious implications on the Phoenix, and we could see some other options pop up over the next couple of doubles coming up. One of which could be Gorjak Gak, who was announced to be returning this weekend, thus ending Daniel Johnson's time with the club. I did think that was a bit strange after knowing that Moller had also gone down. I know they're not the exact same type of player, but it leads me to believe that perhaps Tommy Greer is on the lookout for a longer-term replacement, so watch this space. Only 2 teams on the double this week, with the Cairns Taipans and the Sydney Kings, but of them, only Cairns have a double next week as well. I think this week is going to be a really interesting crossroad for a lot of SuperCoach players. Do you go for the aggressive play and chase points with the Kings guys, or do you look at cash gen and future rounds with players like Josh Roberts or Will Magnay? Whichever way you go, it feels like it could be season defining this round. And with that in mind, let's take a look at some players to potentially trade in or out in our buy, sell, keep and avoid segment. Buy are players that I think are good options to trade in if you don't already own them. Sell are players I think are good options to trade out if you do have them. Keep are players that are being traded out by others, but I think you should consider keeping. And avoid are players that are being traded in by others, but I think you should consider avoiding. Here's how our options last week went. Our buy in Taron Armstrong had a serviceable score of 28 and went up 24.2k. Our sell Keanu Pinder came out with a big 43 on a single. He outscored his combined last 2 games by 14 points in just one game. Our keep Wardenberg let us down fairly decently with 30 on the double, 19 of which he scored in the first half of game 1. Our avoid Parker Jackson Cartwright was someone that I thought would actually go well, but avoiding him was more encouraging people to look at, say, the Cairns guard options instead of him for the longer term. The avoid is fine, but our keep and sell bit us a little bit there. Things like that can happen a lot in fantasy sports. The right decision-making process and potentially decision is reached, but with an unfavourable outcome. Moving on to this week though, our buy, Tajir McCall. This could be a few guys, but I think Tajir McCall is the main priority here. The head of the snake looks like he's getting back to his best, and if that outside shot keeps dropping, probably even better. Has a break even of 35, a score of which he's eclipsed in 3 of his last 4 individual games, let alone being on a double as well. He's averaging close to 40 in that time too. Even with Miller and Armstrong, McCall is still getting plenty of ball handling and playmaking responsibility. He's extremely active on the defensive end as well, and crashing the glass. He's the full package, and with 4 more doubles on tap, still a fantastic buy if you don't already own him. Our sell, or sells, Anthony Lamb and Parker Jackson Cartwright. New Zealand's great run of fixtures has sadly come to an end, with back-to-back singles sandwiching their lonesome double in round 12, where nearly every other team is on a double as well. This means that it's probably time to farewell the dynamic duo. If you have only one of them, it's an easy move to either Adams or Hogue this week, and with Tassie and Sam on back-to-back doubles starting next week, you could even look to move to a Source, Creek, or a Doyle type for potentially comparable output this week, and better set yourself up moving forward. Holding one of these guys on the bench, if you have injuries or other issues, is not the end of the world either, especially in a week like this. Even fielding one in a small double game week, as we've got this week, probably won't be uncommon. But I do think your team will be better in the long run if you trade them out and use that cash to better the side. Keep Will Magnay. Now, I discussed this one with Barnsey on the SuperCoach Hub podcast where I was a guest yesterday. Make sure to go check that out if you haven't already. And how this man is in the top 10 tradeouts is absolutely mystifying for me. Has a break even of -6 and back-to-back doubles after this week. If you have Magnate, you definitely hold him. I was even tempted to boost for him last week, and there's still a chance he finds his way into the team this week. Avoid Lockie Ulbrich. Has been given more opportunity under Coach Tatum, and as a Hawks man, that's great to see. For SuperCoach, however, I don't get this move. Over 200 coaches have brought him in despite Illawarra having one double in the next 5 weeks before they start that great run. If he can continue to get minutes and naturally progress, he'll be great in the back end of the year. If you're after a cheapie for cash gen, there's Josh Roberts sitting right there for not much more money. It doesn't make sense to be bringing in Lockie Ulbrich. A little side note here also, Jacob Wiley has been brought in by a lot of coaches. A bit of point chasing there. I would not be doing that either with Adelaide's terrible run. With 2 teams on the double, our captain options are narrowed down, but just like last week, I think the choice comes down to 4 imports. The 2 Cairns guards and the Kings big guns. Our 4 guys last week were the top 4 scorers of the round, and I see this going the exact same way this week. I think Pat Miller and Jalen Adams are the 2 safe options with the highest floors for the round, but if you're chasing rank and ceiling scores, Hogue and McCall are probably the 2 to go for. Hogue, for example, will most likely be the lesser owned of the lot and therefore the least captain amongst the competition of those guys. I'm going to have at least 3 of them, and I'm still undecided in the direction that I want to go. Like last week, I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. Speaking of last week, trades for last round were a big tick again. Cotton and Robinson out for Miller and McCall, despite that monster game from Bryce. I resisted the urge to use our 3rd boost for Will Magnate, and it actually paid off for us. He did make about 30 odd K cash, but Saar outscored him by 11 points and made nearly 20k of his own. This week, there are a few options to look at. One of the trades I really wanted to do, I fall just 8.1 thousand short of doing PJC and Bannon to Hogue and Adams. That would have been game changing. Initially, it was going to be the 2 New Zealand guns out for the Sydney big boys, but with the Bannon injury, even if he does play, the break even and schedule don't do him any favours, so he has to go. I could swap out PJC for Lamb in that initial scenario, and it does allow me to get the move done. Alternatively, there's having the same outs but bringing in Bolden instead of Hogue, or going left field and moving the 2 New Zealand boys to one of the Kings guys and Big Sauce, who is essential next week. I'm going to be jumping back and forth right up until lockout, so as always, I'll post the final moves on X. If you're not already, make sure you're following us on there to keep up to date with everything. Speaking of X though, feel free to leave us any feedback or questions, just as Josh did last week. We, again, jinxing Mango, who just can't seem to get it done, but shout out to Josh, who's one of our followers, for interacting and getting some questions in. If anyone else wants to join in on that, make sure you're following and you can leave questions, sit starts, whatever you think, and we'll try and help out the best we can. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening or watching, depending on how you tuned in. If you could hit that like button and subscribe on YouTube or tap that follow button on Spotify, it's really appreciated and helps us out a lot. Good luck for round 10. After this week, we'll officially be halfway through the season, so hopefully, even if things aren't going as well, we've still got a long way to go. So good luck with your moves, and we'll catch you next week.